Did you know long-term isolation doesn't do anything to help prisoners with mental illness and is inhumane? Today we will be discussing reasons why we should abolish solitary confinement.
First, we should talk about what solitary confinement is. It is the practice of isolating people in closed cells for 22 to 24 hours a day, virtually free of human contact for periods of time ranging from days to decades. Few prison systems use the term solitary confinement due to the stigma around the name, instead referring to prison segregation or placement in restrictive housing, or SHU. Whatever the terminology, the practice entails a deliberate effort to limit social contact for a determinate or indeterminate period of time. These solitary confinement cells generally measure 6 by 9 feet or 8 by 10 feet. Some have bars, but most often they have solid metal doors. Meals generally come through slots in these doors, as do communication with prison staff.
People placed in solitary confinement are at a greater risk of developing mental illnesses because of their isolation, and the people already suffering from these mental illnesses are at a higher risk of it getting worse. They are not allowed to do anything besides sit in a room and stare at the ceiling. This causes many people to have mental illnesses due to the lack of communication with others and not hearing anyone or anything, which leads people to start self-harming because they do not have anything else to do besides to think how they can hurt themselves. Another main thing that happens in solitary confinement is hearing other people in solitary going crazy. A lot of times the prisoners cannot tell if it is actually happening or if they're making up the situation in their head. Solitary confinement can also cause PTSD. While some may think this is good because it makes them not want to go back, it makes these people scared to do anything, thinking they are going to have to go back. All people in solitary confinement are denied access to mental health services because of the law. If these prisoners were allowed to get help, mental illness in solitary confinement would be reduced.
There are many reasons why solitary confinement is inhumane, but the truth behind solitary is that it is a major form of psychological torture. The prison guards keep you locked in a room for 22 to 23 hours every day. There is no natural lighting in the room, only fluorescent lighting kept on for 24 hours a day. The inmates have no clear idea of when it is night or when it is day, only being let out of the small 6 by 9 foot room for a few hours every week for showers and exercise. This prolonged torture can cause even healthy people to develop mental illness. Even though solitary confinement is happening in government facilities, they are in violation of the prohibition against torture and the other cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment.
Now that we've looked at why we should abolish solitary confinement, we should look at why we may need it. Restrictive housing may be needed and may serve a critical role in achieving prison system goals. From the research on prolonged time spent in restrictive housing done by the U.S. Department of Justice. Quote, Goal 1, increase system-wide prison safety, including fewer riots, murders, and assaults, end quote. A possible outcome of using solitary confinement would be removing certain inmates who may be dangerous to the general population of the prison. Typically, inmates are only put in a solitary confinement when they are found guilty of assault in the prison, selling or obtaining contraband, and failing to pass a drug test. The goal is to punish the people who fail to keep the prison a safe place. The conditions of solitary confinement are typically characterized by hostility and violence. However, in reality, most convicts in solitary are not actually violent. Prisoners are often placed in solitary because they have accumulated a number of nonviolent disciplinary infractions, because they were identified as gang members, or because they were involved in a single fight. On the one hand, numerous studies document that inmates in restrictive housing have a mental illness and report that restrictive housing appears to contribute to mental illness. This view is supported by the argument that humans fundamentally are social beings and that depriving them of social contact for extended periods contributes to mental illness, self-harm, and possible suicide.
In conclusion, solitary confinement can increase prior mental illnesses and or be the cause of new mental illnesses. Solitary confinement also is a major form of psychological torture. The need to abolish long-term isolation in the United States has increased tenfold.